lasting impression on readers. But there's something else about books that takes a story beyond just words. Illustrations. Illustrations give form to our imagination, bring characters to life, and take us on a riveting journey full of endless possibilities. We have with us here today Ruchi Shah, an illustrator and an independent wall painter. She is in fact the illustrator of the Neev Book Award nominated Our Incredible Cow. An illustrator for over 7 years, Ruchi also works with several states facilitating art workshops at local schools. Welcome to NLF 2.0, Ruchi. We are all excited to have you here.
Yeah, you can hear me? Yeah. So my name is Ruchi. I'm a book illustrator, and apart from books, I also work on like walls. I do workshops with kids as well. And today I'm basically just going to show you a little bit of my work. And I really enjoy making things. Okay, so by making I mean that I love working tangibly with materials, with pen, with inks. I don't really use like digital intervention is less in my work. I love making things, and I'll just show you the journey of some of my work so far. Yeah. So basically, I love drawing with pencils and ink. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, I love doodling as well. Then I love doing these intricate drawings, and most of my work is inspired from daily life. It's intricate. It's lots of lines. I'm a city-based illustrator, so always surrounded with a lot of things going on. It's always chaotic, so my visuals are like that sometimes. Yeah, I like to even convert my visuals into three-dimensional. So I take my doodles and I try working with wire and other materials as well. So you see a lot of everyday materials, ink and paint. I love painting walls as well, so I do them quite often because I love seeing my work now going, from a book's page, which is like a smaller screen, to a much larger space, So I like exploring my visuals like that as well. And I like visuals where, you'll have to pause and look at it once more. Can you tell me, what this is? What does it look like? Yeah, it's, what is it? Somebody said, yeah? Yeah, but is it really spaghetti? Just look a little closely. Yeah, exactly. So I just love doing, so I like every time I draw, right, even in the stories there'll be like a lot of layers where every time you revisit the story or the visual, you'll see like more things, inside. They'll be layered. There'll be like many things that you discover every time you go back to the book or back to the visual. And like I said, I love making things, and because I love working with materials, I had an opportunity like a few years ago to start illustrating books, Yeah. So these are some of the titles that I've done with Pratham Books, and the other publisher I've worked with is Tulika as well. And so as you can see, I'm not really fixed on any particular style or material. When I read a script, it's just, it's up to me, it depends on what material comes in my head and what works with the script, to make it go and work well. So each book, I've explored a different way of drawing. I don't restrict it, Yeah. So so this was a book that was nominated over here as well for the prize. And, it's called Our Incredible Cow, illustrated by Mahashweta Devi. And so Mahashweta Devi is actually a social activist, Nobel Prize nominee, but she used to write a lot of children's stories as well for magazines, and they were written in Bengali. And so this one book, right, she wrote this in 1982, okay, and I landed up reading it finally in 2005. Because I also grew up reading a lot of English author books. So yeah, there weren't too many Indian authors that I knew then, and this was a part of my academic project. It's about a pet cow, and it's, in the olden days they used to have like these large families, 10 siblings, 9 siblings, big old house. And they had a cow as a pet. And then the whole story just takes you through how this cow is doing like crazy things. She has a mind of her own. She's not like this domestic, docile creature, So she's a very unexpected one, and she breaks her stereotype completely as to what a cow could be. So when she wanders around the house, she's eating books. And it's a Bengali household, right? So they also eat on banana leaves. And when these banana leaves are thrown outside the house, she starts eating off the banana leaves as well. And then what she discovers is that she has a flavor for, she really enjoys the flavor of the fish curries and the seafood and all of that. So this is a really, it's a crazy cow. I mean, when I read the book the first time, I was like, this is really weird. How is this even happening, Because, I'm a vegetarian, and for me to look at a cow, which is then eating all these items, and it just got me thinking that it was always in my head, right, that this animal has to be like this, or this person has to be like that, and some people are expected to behave in a particular way, but this book kind of broke the stereotypes, okay, and that's what inspired me to illustrate the entire book. And initially I began with like all my hand sketches and drawings, but then as I kept reading the book, I realized that she's eaten such a lot of crazy things that made her like a very, very important and large character, which is why I wanted the cow to be like dominating, and very large, while the 10 family members and the 3 servants that they had in the house are just running around like, as tiny little doodles. And the whole idea was basically inspired from, you have the saying that you are what you think you are and you are what you eat. And that's the line that sort of then inspired me to create the cow every single page with every single thing that she ate. Yeah. And yeah, so I just like I went crazy. I brought a lot of everyday materials, and then and all these visuals are not digitally made. I love composing them. So some of the visuals were like really large, and I would do them on the floor. And there was a projector projecting the drawings at times. And then they were photographed, and then I was able to put them and make them a part of the book. So it's all a part of like making. I love assembling things and making it, Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So this journey was really crazy. Okay, I illustrated it I read it in 2005 and 6 during my academic years. Illustrated it in 2006 itself. And then it was like an 8-year journey to get it published. Because the original publishers, they were dealing with adult books majorly, and they weren't interested. And then when I went to a whole bunch of other publishers, either they were not interested or they didn't have the funding. One of them tried to test it out and it was not working out. One of them wanted a series, and a series would have turned into like a 3 or a 4-year project, and I really wanted to see the book come out. And in between all of this, I had a job, I quit, I came back, and I was always communicating with publishers. But then eventually, like, Tulika reached out, and when it got published, it was really heartening because they did it in 9 languages. They did it like like it has a great reach. And what I love about Tulika and Pratham is that their books, because they're done in all the local languages as well, right? They reach the length and breadth of India. So all these books go to all sorts of not just festivals in the cities, but also to all the village shows and exhibitions. And they reach out to village schools. There are lots of organizations taking these books to the village schools and contributing and setting up libraries there. And what they do from time to time is, when my books are in these regions, right, they do this very sweet thing of like sharing a picture of different children in various parts reading your books, So as an illustrator, I'm just sitting in Bombay or in Bangalore and I'm just working out of here. Sometimes we don't even get the chance to really meet the audience, right? Unless it's a festival or a book launch or something. And when they start sending me these pictures, my sister, who's a teacher's trainer, had this idea that let's go for a voluntary trip. And we landed up going to Ladakh for like 2 months as voluntary teachers. And this is where, these books were reading, these kids were reading these books. And there's this organization, there are 2 organizations over there, 17,000 feet. And there's Avalokiteteshwara Trust, and they set up a lot of libraries there. So this is the first time where, for me, everything changed because all this while, I'm sitting at home and making things on my desk. And I'm in control of all the work that I'm doing. But this was the first time that somebody said, come do an art workshop or teach someone, or come mix with these children. And I actually got to meet a lot of children in all these various schools, So, these are just some of the areas I've worked in, like maybe not too many, but like, 2 villages in each place, maybe 2-3 schools. So, not like, I've worked with probably like 500-600 kids until now, in all these different schools. And after the first 2 years of doing this sort of work, right, we realized one thing, that there wasn't enough content in Indian literature. Another thing is that there wasn't a lot of content even in those schools pertaining to their own culture or their own cities or wherever, they were from. So like if you go to Ladakh itself, there may not be too many stories about Ladakh itself, So I'll just take you through the journey of, okay, so yeah, this is me basically teaching. You can just keep going through it. This is in Himachal with school children. I love painting walls as well. So sometimes if the school has an empty space or a wall, we go and paint spaces. This was in Agastya. This was with Agastya International in Kuppam. That's a village in Andhra Pradesh, and it was collaboratively done with another NGO. Yeah. And it's interesting how these kids were like very comfortable working with materials but not with drawing. Their drawing skills were like zero. Then in the schools in Ladakh, right, they're okay working with pencils and pens, but they'd never use inks. Inks won't be available only except Leh City maybe. But apart from that, you won't be getting these materials. So when you actually take these materials and allow children, like I won't sit and teach them. I would just sit and give a demonstration. Then you give the materials to them and then let them do what they want to with it. And there's no pressure in the sense that you can feel free to draw whatever you want to. As in, if you're good with drawing figures, you draw figures. You want to draw flowers, you draw flowers. But it's just that what I love doing with kids is that I really don't want them to open a book and then just copy out of it. It's just so much nicer when you go out in nature and sit there and look at things, look at people, and then yeah. This was in Lamayuru again in Ladakh. So there were some schools that felt and realized the importance, because most of these schools didn't have art teachers, and art never has a classroom in most of these remote schools I'm talking about. And most of my classes were outdoors also, or what they'll do is they'll give me a corner in the library or in the lunch area, and then I just set up shop over there with a little carton of stationery and arrange everything on the floor, and I would start working there. This school was really awesome because the headmaster realized that you've come right now, you may not come back next year. So they got all the teachers to learn the activities, like about 10 or 15 activities, so they could keep repeating with different students, year after year. Yeah, I just love this. Like every time you go with images and possibilities, kids like go crazy, Yeah. It's not working? Oh, okay. Could you hear me back till now? Okay. Yeah. Do you wanna, yeah. So I'm just going to run you through some, so like, when they draw, right, I've just started collecting a lot of drawings done in all these different regions, so these were just some flowers from one region. Keep going. Yeah, keep going. So this is all from Himachal Pradesh, Okay, now this is typically the houses that the kids would sort of see there and then just sketch those out. And yeah, and these houses were in Andhra Pradesh, and at least in that village, they had like these flat roofs with haystacks on top. So you can see how they relate to their own context, or they kind of will draw. I mean, because I really try to discourage them, because when I used to draw earlier in school, I'll always draw that triangular house with that one, the tree will always be like that. And that's not how it is, right? It's very important to look around and look at it and absorb it and then draw. So this was, both these were drawn in Kuppam, okay, in Andhra Pradesh. This was a child that drew with pencil. And if you see the next one, this was done entirely with leaves. Because a lot of kids were not comfortable with drawing by hand. So they just went out there and picked up dried leaves and sand and stones and whatever they could come back with. And it was amazing, what they did with. I had like 100 peacocks done just with different leaves and flowers that different kids collected and came back. Yeah, and I just like them to explore with ink and Yeah, just keep going. This one was again really good. This kid never wanted to draw, and after giving her one demonstration in ink, she just took the whole box, went to the balcony, sat down there alone, and she just came back with this whole visual of like a night sky, which was, I don't know, she did this alone, like there was no teacher, nobody was with her at that time. She was like all alone, So, yeah, hang on. Keep going, I'll just show you. Yeah, wait a second. So I just want to talk about these books. Okay, so none of these books, I've carried like 3 books with me. These are not my books. These are books that are illustrated by the kids in the schools that I work with, and I'll show you this book after 2 minutes after I just show you the process of how I do them. Because these books were made as a part of a project called the Let's project. Let's is Learn English through stories. It was a project in IIT Bombay. And at that point, we just started with an English reading app that we wanted to test out. Is it working in villages? Will it have a result or not? But then we started realizing that a lot of the content on these apps was always very, Western. All English books which the kids there could not relate to. So when we started talking to the teachers and the kids, we realized that they have a lot of local stories. And we got them to write it. So this was written in a Marathi script, but this is the Warli dialect. Okay, sorry, just go back up once more. Go back up once more. Yeah, so that was in Warli. Yeah, that was, the teacher helps us translate it into Marathi. This is in the remote schools only. And then I'm just going to show you images of what the kids drew. And to give you a sense of context, these are some of the students that I worked with in that school. And then you'll just see how all these are their drawings and you'll see them in the school. This is like their surrounding was totally rustic with green trees, and it's all very kacha and very basic with ponds and the vegetable patch that they maintain. Yeah, there's one kid who just sat and drew. He drew like one long sheet only of trees with forests, that's all he drew. These were like their little sheds and places, where people have classes or eat lunch, and then these were the houses that they drew. Warli, this is the Warli tribal art, because this was typically in a region where the Warli tribals live there. And then, there was a kid who drew all these clouds with all these patterns inside it. So I just started seeing a link in all of this. So the kids there have to clean, they have to also maintain the vegetable patch. It's a completely self-sufficient school. And then obviously they study and do their homework and all of that as well. And we had a character like a little demon in the story who not just, he obviously loves eating human beings, but he loves making his own pickles. So he's not taken a slave, he's not ordering anyone around, but here's a monster who's doing his own housework, we never had a classroom as usual, so open air, shed, and kids would work there. And I started building a little library of all the trees and images I came back with. And I'm just going to show you the book, okay, because every single thing, I just play the role of the person who composes it. You want to come and help me? Come in. So you see the book now. And every image in this book is entirely and my thing is that, see, this is a prototype, we publish it someday, but I didn't want to restrict on the format of the book or the size of the book or anything else. So it's like an entire story in rhyme. We've written it for 3 levels. And the best part is that you can go back to these schools and give these books back to the kids and show them what they've done. And it also helps to convince the artists why art is important or why art classes should be taken. It's very crazy. And basically what happened is that I love making things. I have my own desk, but now my workspace is wherever I go, to whichever village I go, or whichever city I'm painting out of. And the whole idea is that I'm no longer the creator. The children have become content creators. And we're just a small bunch of people, guiding them or helping them write this out. And that way we have more local stories which are inspired from their lives. Do we have 2 more minutes? No? Okay, we're done. I have more books in case you want to come back and see them. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchi. Thank you so much. If any of you have any questions or would like to meet Ruchi, she will be outside in the book signing area in a bit. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Most people say that teenage years are some of the best days of a person's life. Teenagers may disagree though. These are the years of thrill, excitement, disappointment, sometimes all in the same day. Ela is just like any other teenager, full of questions about her identity and her place in life. Sampurna Chatterjee's gothic and fantasy novel for young adults, Ela, the girl who entered the unknown, has received raving reviews from critics. Apart from being a novelist, Sampurna also dons the hat of a poet, translator, and children's author. Let's hear it for Sampurna Chatterjee.
Thank you so much, Asha, for the lovely succinct introduction. a terrible task given that I've written all these vast number of books. So thank you very much for the economy and precision of that introduction. It's absolutely lovely to be reading to the target audience that features in this book as well. Okay, and it's also a bit terrifying because I've done this many times, but each time it feels like the first time. And I don't have much time. I have about 20 minutes, I believe. So I'll try and keep it quick and short. And how many of you have already read it? Okay, and I met somebody who already read it, and some of you have got the book in your hands and are going to read it. So I don't want to give away any important plot points or anything. But I will try and set it up a bit for those of you who haven't had a chance to pick it up yet. By reading the very beginning. It's a grim beginning. I hope everybody is above, well, we've all had these thoughts. There's nothing, as Paro Anand said in the morning, this idea of what is age appropriate needs a bit of flexibility. This is the story of Ella. I call her Ella, you call her Hila. It's the same. I mean, this is why I chose this name, because it's also, her full name is Ella Chaudhary or Ila Chaudhary, and she could belong to any part of India. That's one reason I chose this name. It had to be a name that sat across our many linguistic registers. Okay, so here goes. She tells her own story. She is the maker of her own narrative, and she begins her story thus. The day I turned 13 was the day I wanted to die. The day the blackness fell on me so sharp and exact, it took the shape of a monster bird that dug its claws in my shoulder and never left. A bird with a voice that no one else could hear, inhuman, un-avian voice, neither croak nor caw nor cackle, but a hard, flat, damp voice like stones drowned at the bottom of a lake. The day the ground fell away from under me so that I was falling through thin air, my breath being sucked away as I fell soundlessly, nothing to hold on to but the claws that tore. The monster bird held me in its claws like an eagle, a mouse, and I was grateful. For nothing but its terrifying grip saved me from falling all the way to the end of nothingness. That was the day everything I thought I was turned out to be a lie. Okay, so this is how her story begins. As you go on, you realize what that lie was. The story begins with her on her 13th birthday. She's very popular, she's loved by many people, she has super many friends. They all come for her birthday, and something terrible happens. Which is no secret, but I'm going to read that bit out to you because that's more effective than me summarizing what happens. So she's having this marvelous time, and she says, not a stain, not a flaw. It's a perfect day until they walked in, the uninvited guest from next door, mother and little boy. The boy who was no friend of mine, not because he was only 7, but because I had seen him being nasty to the boys littler than him. Seen something ratty and obnoxious in his face. A line on his forehead where no line should have been. Smita and Mahesh. Now this is very radical in India. We don't usually call our parents by their first name. How many people here have read To Kill a Mockingbird? Lots of us. Remember how they call their parent Atticus? And of course, everything we read impacts everything we write. I found myself very naturally making Ella call her parents Smita and Mahesh. Okay, so Smita and Mahesh are her parents. Smita and Mahesh welcome them. Who the unwelcomed, uninvited guests? They were just in time for the cake cutting. And wouldn't Ashok like a cold drink and a sandwich? Of course he would like both. But what was his mother doing, bustling her way into the kitchen to swipe my favorite mug off the shelves for her boy? Who gave her that right? And why did Smita do no more than smile and pour the coke? And the boy, shoving past knees and ducking under elbows, why did he have to run? Who runs with a mug of coke in their hands in a stranger's house? Knocked slap bang into me, so that there was a huge spreading foamy stain on my flame red skirt and a sudden burst of wild rage
as he dropped my favorite mug and it broke on the floor, spilling its remains where Shaheen and Tarana sat, so that they scrambled to their feet screaming. The goldenness of my evening wrecked and ruined. I took the boy by his shoulders. I was shaking him. He was screeching. His mother was tearing him away with words of wrath. What sort of girl was I? So big, still no manners. What had my parents taught me? Nothing, nothing. Useless parents with a jungli in their house. And then the wild rage exploding behind my eyes and me shouting back, leave my parents out of it. It's your son's fault. Who asked you to come uninvited? And Smita trying to shush me. And then the boy screeching behind his false tears. Who said they were my parents? They were not. They were not my real parents. I was not their real child. They had picked me up from the street. His mother said so. And the air growing thick and hot and dark around me with just 2 spots of light. Ashok and his screaming mother. And out of the thick, hot, dark, Mahesh's quietest, scariest voice asking them to leave. Could they please leave? The boy's mother uttering a high, sharp, disgusting little laugh, like she had snatched something glittering out of her hands, then walking out, pulling the boy behind her, telling him he should never play with such a dirty girl again. Who knows which dustbin she came out of? What lies. She's a liar. Tell me she's lying. Why did you tell her to stop uttering such hilarious lies in front of all my friends? Why did you let her? The questions rose wildly to my tongue and died as I turned my face to see the truth written on Mahesh's stony jaw, in Smita's quivering lips. It was not Ashok's mother who had lied. It was mine. Okay, so this is how it begins. And I haven't read this for a long time, and I find myself getting completely caught in her, in her emotional turmoil, because imagine what it would be like to be in her place, right? And as the story goes, you realize that Ella has to deal with this fact. She feels very wronged. Can someone tell me why she feels so wronged? Yes.
She feels like her whole life's been a lie.
Why does she feel her whole life has been a lie? Any idea?
I think that she based
Yeah.
We're not really okay.
And the thing is, this is the key question that I try to answer in the book. Okay, which is, one is the answer to who am I, and two, just because these parents had not told her the truth, they were wrong in not telling her the truth, but this idea of real parents and what is a lie is the truth that I want to discover. Okay, do you think the fact that they had adopted her, did that automatically disqualify them and make them not real parents? What do you guys feel in the room? Anybody else? I'll come to you if you will. What do you think? What is this whole thing about being real parents? What does a real parent do? A parent takes care of you. Okay. And for all the 13 years that Ella has been taken care of by her beautiful parents, who many of her friends wish they were their parents, because they're very chilled out, they're very sensible, they're great fun, which doesn't often happen with friends' parents. Okay, it doesn't even happen with your own friends. So as the book goes along, there is a sense where she has to come to terms with what has happened to her. Do you think she's overreacting? Some of you? Do you think she's, because what she does later is a bit extreme? Yeah, can you tell me why?
I feel like when she was talking to her aunt, and she's saying like, I never feel
Okay, you felt that. Because the very sad fact and the sad truth is that I have, and this has happened after I wrote the book, I have had friends and relatives who adopted children, and at this difficult age, even those who knew that they were adopted, they just turned on their parents. Okay, and they went ballistic. So the sorry part is that they often say that truth is stranger than fiction. Having created a fiction and then inserted a fantasy into it to make her come out of this horror that was her life, I realized to my own horror that truth was suddenly reflecting fiction, where all this crazy stuff that Ella goes into has been happening in real life to people who even knew that they were haunted. Okay, so I think there is a turning point in a person's life where you have a crisis. When we write, writers use crises as a starting point because it would be so boring to have a non-dramatic situation. Remember when we write, I don't know how many of you are also writers in this room, and there's always something you need to do to keep the momentum going. Okay? And when this monster bird appears, as you will see, the monster bird has a talking part in this book. It's almost like all her fears are then projected and made real in the form of the monster bird. Okay? And she goes through several adventures which are interesting. She writes a fantasy. I'm going to read you a very little bit from the fantasy. She stops going to school, by the way. Smita and Mahesh, she stops talking to her parents. She exiles herself. And it's a total overreaction. I couldn't agree with you more. She thinks everybody hates her because now everybody thinks that she's from the dustbin. She hates herself. There's nothing worse than self-hatred. And she exiles herself. She shuts the door on the world. Okay? And she finds herself in a very dark, airless room with no one but a monster bird to talk to. And everybody's very worried for her. They send her to a clinic, they try and sort out her mind, they try and medicate her. She doesn't have a lot of fun doing that. When she comes back to her room, she finds a book. Her aunt is a writer. I like using the idea of writing as a healing process, and I do believe stories help us to overcome our worst fears. And she's resisting everything, and she finds this book, this notebook, and she has always been a reader and a writer. There's a nice little bit which I will hopefully read out to you about writing as well. And I'll read you a little bit from the journal that she keeps, that she starts. How many of you actually do journals? Because I do know that a lot of young friends of mine do that, and a lot of older friends do that too. So she then starts writing what she thinks will be a journal, but it turns into a fantasy. So you're actually getting two books for the price of one, because inside Ella there is a fantasy, alright, which is also written by her. It's an alternative universe that she creates for herself. Why do you think she creates an alternative universe? Yes?
I think because she doesn't like the state which she is in. She doesn't like her own surroundings. So she might think that creating an alternate universe would probably make her feel maybe better in some way, because it's not the universe which she's in.
You're absolutely right. The parallel universe is the one that she has control over. She might feel better there. It helps her fit in. You know why? Because when you write your own story, it's like life, right? We have no control over life. One reason why I became a writer is, my God, I can control this universe. Sometimes this universe plays tricks on me always. It doesn't always work the way you plan. But this idea that maybe I will find an answer, maybe I will fit in better. You had a...
The character that she writes about in the book kind of like describes herself in a different way.
Yes, absolutely. Because you read it and you said something very interesting in the beginning, where you said it's a parallel world, the same thing that you said. It's also a mirroring world. Okay? It's like I see myself in the mirror and the image is reversed. What happens then? What does my perception of reality then become? So I'll read you the first two paras from the fantasy. It's almost like a fantasy novel that she writes, okay? The girl who was hatched from an egg came out shaking her soft, wet limbs. The moment the dry earth air touched her, the slippery white film that coated her evaporated, and she felt a new steadiness, a firmness in her body, which was no more than 5 minutes old. But inside, she was ageless. She had been born countless times before. Since the beginning of time, she had hatched out of the egg, full-formed and invincible, ready for the task that no one else could do. This time, the task was so colossal, she, who did not know the word fear, felt a stirring inside. That was not the white-hot joy that accompanied every birth. She had saved the southern coast from another cataclysm. She had sealed the rift that had threatened to swallow a whole city. She had stopped a killer disease from spreading by changing the way the wind blew. All this and more she had done. But now she trembled. Now she had to find her mother. She never thought she had a mother. She was the girl who was hatched from an egg. She had created herself. What had a mother to do with her? She slept, and when it was time for her to do the task, the egg cracked and she crawled out. Alive and whole and ready, she was neither bird nor human. But if the elders had told her to look for her mother among the wild birds of this earth, she would not have felt so surprised. She had felt in her all kinds of powers. The birdness of an eagle as it swooped upon its prey, the fleetness of the water as it rushed along the banks, the treeness of a root as it pushed its mighty way through the earth. If a mother had been a tree, or an eagle, or a river, she would not have been surprised. But a human mother, a woman, her heart shook, and she had to place her hand where it fluttered like a leaf. Okay, so she reinvents herself as what? As the girl who was hatched from an egg. And she gives herself all kinds of powers. So she's a superhero. Yeah. So she gives herself superpowers and she has done all these amazing things. But now she has a very simple task and she's terrified. Will she find her real mother? What does it mean? Who is the real mother? Will she be alone on this adventure as she goes through a landscape of mangroves and children? I mean, it's a completely parallel universe, as you rightly pointed out. And she makes a very good friend in this parallel universe. His name is Rahim. And Rahim and she, who calls herself the girl, she doesn't give herself a name in this universe, they have to face a terrible task, they have to overcome a terrible situation, and I'm happy to inform you, for those who think it's very sad and will not have a happy ending, they will come out of it somehow. I will show you just this picture in the last minute that we have. Can you see what's going on the cover? The girl with the wings, and there's the boy. Can you tell what the image on the back cover is? Can you see the fish, the body of the fish? Do you know the story of the Matsya avatar of Vishnu? Yeah, the horned fish. Yeah. And remember she says, I had so many lives. So just as To Kill a Mockingbird has been part of my reading universe, so has Indian mythology. So this idea of the avatars that we have, isn't every new self simply another avatar? And she's looking for herself. She's looking for who Ella is. Ella, now known as a Dr. Ella. Is she ostracized? Is she exiled? Does she have a friend on this planet? The answers can be found if you read the book, which I hope you will do. And it's not just about being adopted, it's about being human, it's about having serious issues of crisis and identity and not knowing who one's friends are and not knowing whether one will survive this insane adventure that we call life. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sapurna. If any of you would have any questions or would like to chat with Sapurna or would like to get your copy signed, she will be right over here and you can get your copy signed. Thank you so much.
Amidst us we have the great author David Melling. He started out as an editor and advertising illustrator. He turned his attention to children's books, creating adorable characters and enjoyable stories. His remarkable talent of writing stories and illustrating them was instrumental in creating about 150 books, out of which he's written 40 of them.
His most adorable creation, Douglas, a small bear in need of that perfect hug, is a wonderful representation of what it is like to be a small child learning about the world in his book Hugless Douglas. He will share his views on children's literature and some strategies on how to motivate young readers. Let me welcome author David Melling.
know about this story, this character? Okay. So, his name, this bear's name is called Douglas. And in this story, he's hugless. So that means he loves hugs. But let's find out when he has a problem and he can't find a hug. So we'll go straight into that, shall we? Okay, that's it. So, Douglas, I've been very lucky. Douglas has been lots of Douglas books. So I think the idea initially, at the beginning, was just to have one book, but there have been many at the moment. So I'm very lucky to say that there are lots of books at the back here. And one question I'm asked a lot is, why is he still called Hugless Douglas? Because after the first book, he's not always hugless. And in fact, he's not hugless in this in the end. But that's a good question, and I don't really know the answer, except maybe for the adults among you, some more commercial thinking behind it. I thought the Hugless Douglas name sounded better than just Douglas. Not my thoughts, but anyway. So, and also, I think in a minute, there's going to be a picture up here. They very recently, because there were so many of these books, they had to give them colour codes in the back. You can see here, because there were so many, they couldn't decide. Parents were going into shops and they couldn't remember which book they had and which book they haven't. So now they can say we've got the red one, but we haven't got the yellow one. And that's what the cover used to be like. So we gave it a new look recently. Is there a... Okay, that's fine. So I'm going to come over here. So here we go. Douglas. So I'm actually going to read, with the new covers, there's a little bit more information. So there's a little note here I'm going to read. And at the end of the book, there's a little hug game, which isn't in the original book. But I'll come to that in a minute. So it says here, hello, are you ready to join Hugless Douglas and his friends on his first adventure? The idea for this story came about while I was reading to my son. He's 14 now and he hates me telling this story. He's not here, so that's fine. Just before bedtime, he gave me a tired hug. And the next morning, we had a breakfast hug. Over the next 2 days, the hug game was born. And at that time, I had a bear in my sketchbook, looking for an adventure. So that's where the story came from. So here we go now, Hugless Douglas. One spring morning, a big yawn came from the back of a deep, dark cave. It was a young brown bear, and his name was Douglas. Okay. I need a hug, said Douglas. And here he is here. There's a picture in the background of him hugging his mum. Gives you a clue he likes hugs. So he wriggled out of his pajamas, brushed his hair, and put on his scarf. Now, one question people ask me sometimes is, why does this character go to bed in pajamas, and when he goes up in the morning, he takes everything off and goes to bed? That's a very good question, and all I can say is the secret world of picture books. So it just is, and that's it. So he brushed his hair, put on his scarf, and went to look for her. Okay. My best hugs are big, thought Douglas. So he went up to the biggest thing he could find, wrapped his arms all the way around, and gave it a squeeze. It didn't feel quite right. Oh, grunted Douglas. It's a bit, heavy. Boof. It's fallen over there. Nope, that's no good. My best hugs are tall, thought Douglas. So he went up to the tallest thing he could find. He hugged the bottom, he hugged around the middle, and he hugged as high as he could reach. But it was all wrong, and it had splinters. Oops, wrong way. My best hugs are comfy, thought Douglas, and he trotted towards a cosy-looking bush. He cuddled the bush, but it felt very odd. The leaves quivered and trembled. Now, can you see anything in that picture that makes that look a bit odd? What do you think? Anything? Maybe it's a bit difficult to tell, but if you look in this bush, and you came into about there's a pair of eyes looking at you. So the leaves quivered and trembled and ran away. That's a surprise, isn't it? Full of eyes and full of legs. What do you think's inside there then? Spiders? Maybe. Ants? No, they're too big for ants. Sheep. I think they're sheep actually. There they are, the sheep, and they're all running away. Give us a hug, cried Douglas. They're running after us. No, baaed the sheep, we're too busy. He scooped up armfuls anyway and tried to cuddle them gently. But they kicked and squirmed and didn't like it at all. Poor Douglas for that. Yeah. Okay. Poor Douglas. Why can't I find a hug? He said. Now the other thing about Douglas is that with his bristly fur, when he touches a sheep, it's like a fleece, they kind of stick. It's a bit like Velcro. So he doesn't know that's happening there. And in fact, that happens in a lot of the stories. A lot of this sticking going. Why can't I find a hug? He said. Now, if I want a hug, I sit in my tree and let me try. Zoops upstairs. Up the tree straight away. Let me try, whooped Douglas, and he scrambled up to the owl. But he soon found himself in a clumsy muddle. Twoo twit, said the owl. And poor Douglas has knocked the owl out of the tree, and he's looking very cross. Okay. I only want a hug, sniffed Douglas. Perhaps there's one down here. The hole there. He felt something long and rabbity. Gave it a tug. There's a rabbit down there. He's busy chopping up his carrots. Look. Imagine being in your home chopping up carrots and someone grabs your tail. Douglas could tell the rabbit didn't want a hug. He sniffed. He's feeling very sad now. He sniffed again, and without thinking, he wiped his nose on the fluffy end. Excuse me, shouted Rabbit. Put me down. So he kind of used the poor rabbit as a tissue by mistake. Yeah, okay. Well, I need a hug, said Douglas. He's feeling very sad now. Well, I can't find one anywhere. Oh, I see, said Rabbit kindly. Come with me. So look, he's walking past the sheep, and they're all running away straight away. He took Douglas by the paw, grumpy look from the owl, and he led him round and about. Feeling very sad now. At last they came to a deep, dark cave, where a sleepy someone was just waking up. Douglas peeked inside. He had the funny feeling he knew that someone very well. Hug! Cried Douglas, and he ran as fast as he could. To his mum. Come to think of it, my best hugs are from someone I love, said Douglas. And he snuggled into the biggest warm arms he knew. There we go. So on the last page, when I did this book, I made a mistake. The good thing about illustrators, the honest thing about illustrators, we always make mistakes. And one of my big mistakes, when I did this story, I was one page short. And so we thought, oh, we'll have to make another page. And then I thought, well, why don't we, on the last page, have little pictures, lots of little pictures of different types of hugs. So here are a few hugs. And maybe when we go through them, I wondered if one or two of you might come up and help me show everyone what they might look like. So let's have a look first of all. First of all, let's have a look at this one here. It's a shy hug. All a bit shy. If you find yourself falling over, well, have a falling hug. Just grab someone on the way down. And then you have something like a don't let go hug. And there's one up here. Anyone who's good at standing on their head, an upside down hug. And this one for the adults here, an unrequited hug. I think we've all been there, haven't we? So So let's have a look now. I wonder if there's any volunteers who can come up and help me show everyone what a sandwich hug looks like. Is there anyone who'd like to come up? 3 people? Are you comfortable hugging people? Yeah? 1 person? 2, 3? Okay. There'll be some more hugs. You try that. So stand with your back. Look at this. Very good. And if you're on your own, whoever it might be, how do you give yourself a solo hug? What else have we got? How about a best friend hug? Hug your best friend, or a brother and sister hug? Okay, now listen. The last one, now this may be a really bad idea, and it may be very, very chaotic. But if we channel our energies, this might work. How about doing a daisy chain hug? So what that means is that if you want to come up, we'll start here, and we just stand in a row and work our way down. Okay, I think that's about it for now, I think. Any other ideas for hugs? Okay, so here we go. Douglas, the great cake baker. Early one morning, Douglas was surprised to find a trail of footprints running across his bed. They were sticky and they had honey. Sorry, and they tasted of honey. All the way along there. Who's been walking on my bed? Asked Douglas. The honey-flavoured footprints led all the way to the food cupboard. Where's my honey? Asked Douglas. He gasped. He looked at everything very carefully. I can't eat any of this without honey on top, and I'm really hungry. Douglas quickly changed, we spoke about that without the pyjamas, and he followed the honey trail outside, walking along here. If only I could find a clue to help me, he sighed. He was just sitting on there on a very sticky looking rock. And when he's got up from the very sticky looking rock, there's a little bit of honey all the way to his bottom. Then Douglas twitched his nose. I know that smell. And look at that tree. It's full of sticky sheep. Ah, hello Douglas, bowed the sheep. Why are you wearing my honey? Asked Douglas. We're collecting everything we need to make honey cakes, said Flossie. Can you help? Oh yes, said Douglas. I love baking. The sheep passed down the berries, the nuts, the carrots, and the honey. And in this picture, I do like in my pictures to have other things going on in the background, so once, hopefully, if you've read it a few times, you'll see other things. And in this picture, you can see there's a very unfortunate sheep that on the previous page, you can just see is getting stuck with honey with lots of grass on him. And you can see him all the way through the book getting more and more cross about that. Anyway, so they've got all the berries and the ingredients. Then Flossie made sure they all wore their proper outfits. And don't forget to wash your paws, she said. Let's bake. So we have berries and nuts and carrots. So you can just see what's happening in the pictures really. Flossie shouted instructions from her recipe book and they all set to work. Eggs, flour, honey, not grass, and mix. I've finished. Can I eat some now? Said Douglas. Not yet, it needs baking first, said Flossie. Well, why not try these berries? Showing some berries now. No thanks, said Douglas, clutching his hungry tummy. They haven't got honey on. I'll wait. He watched the sheep put dollops of the mixture onto the baking trays and into the oven. By now, everyone was very hungry. Douglas found a place and joined the back of a bad-tempered queue. There was pushing and nudging, and then someone threw a carrot. Boing, badoink. Food fight! And there's a lot going on there, so just read the pictures for a bit. Yes, lots of messing going on there. Hands up who's ever had a food fight. No. Sorry parents, I apologise in advance for that one. Okay. Next page. Ping went the oven. The sheep froze. The cakes are ready, said Flossie. Yay, cried the sheep, and they scrambled towards the delicious smell. Save some for me, cried Douglas. But the sheep didn't hear, and soon every single cake had been eaten. Oh, that's a bit unfortunate. Okay, yep. What am I going to eat now? Said Douglas. He looked at the carrots on the floor and sighed. But everyone's so full they just can't move. He bit into one of the carrots. Oh, he said, with a surprise. Yeah, that's nice. Douglas wasn't used to eating anything without honey on top. He took a mouthful of berries. Even nicer. And nuts. Yummy, he cried. Carrots, berries and nuts are almost as good as honey. But not quite. Nothing beats honey and hugs. And there we go. And then on the last page, because when I did that first book with lots of different hugs, each Douglas book now has a little extra thing at the end, and this is how to decorate your cupcake sheep. So just with a few pictures, it's like with cloak. You just go through the sequence and it shows you what to do. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you. Okay, if there's time for one or two, shall I ask one or two questions? I've got about 2 minutes, I think, and I've got to be somewhere else. If any of you want to join me, I'm going to do a drawing demonstration, a step-by-step drawing for anyone who's interested in the tent in about 10 minutes or so. Any questions as you leave? Anyone? That's fine. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. For me.
A.
Yeah.
Y.
Yeah.
A.
Yeah.
N.
N. Okay. Thank you.
So there are different things that's happening.
You're welcome. Thank you. Oh, another one. Another drawing. His own drawing.
Good evening. Our hosts for the next session are two women who are at the forefront of redefining contemporary Indian writing. While the language they write in is English, their work is suffused with the sensibilities that come from people who love and live deeply. Women who write in a time that is reshaping the dimensions of the space that women occupy in the world today. Their eloquence and imagination have made for books you hold on to and muse about long after you finished reading them. My first brush with Samita Arni was when I was drawn to the Mahabharata adaptation that she wrote and illustrated at 8 years of age. I was regaled by the freshness she brought to this epic through the unconditioned worldview of a child. She is a novelist, a columnist, a reshaper of epics, and an equal rights activist. Since dazzling the world with her Mahabharata, Samita has also written Sita's Ramayana, a graphic novel that was on the New York Times bestseller list, and The Missing Queen, a mythological thriller set in modern times. Sharanya Manivannan, poet, novelist and columnist, is a writer whose works are suffused with the complex and strong voice of the feminine perspective. Renowned for her resplendent visual imagery, Sharanya has 3 publications to date: Amuchipuchi, a poignant children's book; The High Priestess Never Marries, an anthology of stories; and The Altar of the Only Word, a stunning poetic fiction. Her next book, The Queen of Jasmine Country, is scheduled for publication shortly.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and spending this afternoon with us. I'll get right into it because it's a short session. Sam, you started to write and publish as a child. and similarly for me as well. So how has it been coming to a lit fest like this? Is it coming full circle for you? What were you like as a child?
I'm really not like I am today. I was really nerdy, I wasn't a good speaker, I was very nervous with lots of people, I wasn't very social at all. I feel like my life has done 180 degrees since then. And it's been really interesting to come back to a lit fest like this because I haven't written children's books for a long while, since 2011. And I'm 34, and everyone keeps referring to me as this sort of weird child prodigy, which I am not. Please note, I am not. It's a very hard thing to live up to. I want to be silly, I want to sort of beanbag, I want to wear silver skirts and paint my nails. Nobody who respects me as any sort of model or path to follow. I'm just being a silly human being, and I like being that. How about you, Sharanya? You also achieved a lot of sort of celebrity and fame at an early age, and how do you feel about that, and how do you feel the green with that?
So I started to write when I was 7, and the reason I did that was because I love books. I love books. Even before I could read, I would look at books. The physical object gave me comfort. But where it became a really meaningful part of my life is that in adolescence, when I was 11 or 12, and I was really shy and very lonely, so I would escape into the school library whenever I could and take solace from being around books. And there was one year in school, in Standard 8, in which I'd always be the first person to arrive. And I would spend 45 minutes waiting for my classmates, and I would write a song every morning. And I had no
song every morning?
Yeah.
Oh my God!
But see, this is the thing. I think most children are really creative in a similar way. It's just something gets hammered out of us. In childhood or in our teenage years, something gets hammered out of us. So I with my book, Yamuchi Kuchi, I've been meeting so many kids in schools, and they tell me, Miss, I have written 3 books. Maybe 7 years old. Okay, so how's that for prodigy?
Oh God.
So something happens to us in our school systems that takes it out of us.
Sharanya, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Your writing also landed you in trouble at an early age. It did. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Because that's also about the responsibility sometimes of being a writer. Everyone wants to be a child prodigy, everyone wants to publish at an early age, but that's also a huge burden and a responsibility, and you have to live by what you write in many ways.
So when I was 22, I got into trouble with the government of Malaysia, which was where I had grown up, for writing about the political apartheid that that country is under. And I had no sense of the kind of consequences I was going to face. I was just a blogger. I did spoken word. I was just interested in the arts and a reader. I paid for it in a big way. But I think that kind of censorship need not always be so dramatic. It happens to so many people on so many levels. It doesn't have to be a government branding you an enemy of the state. It can be authorities closer to home, authorities within your home. It can be family members. It can be teachers, relatives, the media, all kinds of things which create not just censorship, but consequences if you were to speak out. So I'd now like to talk about our 2 novels which are coming out. So Sam and I have both written novels about ancient Tamil poets in the Madurai region. In the Madurai region. So tell me about writing The Prince and Ilango Adigal, your inspiration and everything about it.
Okay, I will tell everything about it. By the way, Sharanya's book is coming out in October. My book is coming out in November. So we are like having twin books coming about writers who are coming out from the Madurai region. So we are sisters. Our books are brothers or sisters or whatever you call it. Siblings. So The Prince is based... Any of you here Tamilian? Any Tamilians in the house? I'm partly Tamilian. Okay. Yay! Okay. You guys have heard of... The Shilapatikaram is a very famous Tamil epic. And it's very interesting because when I grew up, we always thought that epics featured men. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Iliad, the Odyssey. These were stories that featured men. Where were the women in these stories? They were, like Penelope sewing away, or you had, Draupadi or Kunti or Sita. These were the kind of characters. But Tamil epics are very different. The Manimekalai, the Shilapatikaram feature women as the primary, as the hero of the story. Let's not use even the word the heroine. These are stories featured on women. And what's really interesting about the Shila Padikaram, and it's a story about a woman, it's a story about justice, it's a story about a woman who confronts a king, and because of how she confronts the king, he dies, and it's about social protest, it is about rage, it is about speaking up and speaking out, and I think, but it's what's really fascinated me about it is actually an epic written by a man, Ilango Adigal. And we know very little about this, we know a little bit about him. His name translates into Prince Ascetic, and so he's a prince who, legend has it, renounced his claim to the throne in favor of his brother, went on to become a Jain monk, and write this epic about women, and a very loving epic, let me put it that way. Let me use the word loving in that story. So here's a monk writing about women, relationships between men and women as well, which is quite interesting. And I became interested in the story of this man because we think also of writing in such gendered ways that, oh, this is a woman's book. And because I'm a writer, only women will read my book. Or only women will read the kind of stuff that Sharanya will write. At least this is the way publishers approach it. But here you have a man writing about women. And then I got really interested in that. And I said, let me be the woman who writes about a man who's writing about women. And so that is the genesis of the story. I've added a lot of masala into it because I need this to sell, I need to make money, I need to continue buying silver skirts. This is very important on my list of priorities. And so there is a lot of masala, there's a lot of adventure, there's a lot of romance that happens in the story, but it's also to reacquaint us with this world of Tamil literature, which is incredibly rich, but which we know very little about outside of Tamil Nadu. I mean, Tamilians are very proud of their culture, but have you guys heard of the Sangamera before? How many of you had? 2 people. Yes, 3 people, but that you don't count Sharanya. But so to really also acquaint us with aspects of our history that we don't know, and our literary culture, and our culture of dissent and protest as well, which goes back into our epics. And you, Sharanya, you tell me now about the Queen of Jasmine County. I want to hear.
So the Queen of Jasmine Country is an imagination of sorts. So the poet Andal, the Bhakti poet Andal, have you heard of her? 9th century Tamil poet. So she wrote verses to Vishnu, and the legend around her is that she eventually married him. So she was raised from the status of poet to goddess. But that story that is told about her does not match what is in her poetry. Her poetry displays something else altogether. It's full of longing and yearning and anger and demand and desperation, and it's wholly human. So what drew me to Andal is that legend has it she was 16 years old. Why was a girl from an Orthodox community not married off in childhood? How come she was literate? What was it like to be a 16-year-old in a small town, not even in Madurai but in Pudurai, outside of Madurai, small town, 16 years old, you're not married, you're lonely, you're an adopted child and you're aware of it, you have a sense of unbelonging, and you write everything you feel, you put into your verses. That person, whose name was Kode, who did not know, who had no idea that one day she would be Andal, she would be worshipped in temples, her poetry would be recited from memory centuries down the line. She had no idea that that would be her eventual destiny after death. What was that girl's life like? That's what my book is about.
It strikes me really when we talk about this that both Ilango Adigal and Andal are living lives that go beyond what we imagine lives were like in the past. Here is a man writing about women, and here is Andal, who's for a 16-year-old displaying great precocity in her writing. So I teach now in a college, and I shared some of Andal's Bhakti poetry with my students, and they were blushing. Boys were blushing to read it. Because it's starkly raw, it's visceral. It's even our ideas of what's appropriate for different ages has changed so much since that time. People are reciting this poetry sometimes without even, they don't know what it means. Sharanya, why does this happen? How come people don't know what they're reading?
So, to speak about Andal in particular, only because she is my protagonist and is dear to me, but this is true of many writers who have been venerated in a way that goes beyond their works. And it's also true of scriptures and religious texts, where people will cling to the idea of something or the symbol of something, but know nothing about what it actually is. They refuse to engage with it. So with Andal, she had two major works, the Tiruppavi, which is recited in temples in the month of Margazhi, December to January, and the Nachiyar Tirumoli. The Nachiyar Tirumoli is a much darker, much more sensual work, and it's almost completely erased, with the exception of one poem which is recited at weddings. I personally know of people who undertook ritualistic recitations of the Tiruppavi and refused to read the Nachiyar Tirumoli. Refused to read it. Why? Because there was a controversy in December in which the Tamil lyricist Vairamuthu said something about Anda, which, I thought it was a beautiful suggestion. He said that there is some evidence that she may have become a Devadasi in the Sri Rangam temple. It's quite a beautiful idea if you think about it.
It would really work with her poetry, I think, from what I know of it.
So there were massive protests in Tamil Nadu because he said that. Because people did not know what a Devadasi was, and they had all kinds of misogynistic and casteist ideas which made them very, very angry about the statement. So during that time, I had conversations with people who, to sing Margazhi month, they were doing this ritualistic recitation and saying, but Andal didn't do this, didn't do that. I said, but look at the Nachiyar Tirumoli. And they refused to read it.
Oh man, what they lost.
So, coming back to you and your work, do we have? Good. Sita's Ramayana and The Missing Queen were also explorations of the myths and legends and sort of narratives which belong in the collective consciousness, but which people don't necessarily engage with, right? So this is a long thing for you, a long and beautiful engagement. I don't know why you're frowning. What comes next from the pantheon?
Oh God, actually, I was like, after all of this, I really have to break away because, this is also defining so much of what I am and defining my career as well. Like, I go out there and I'm supposed to be representing Indian culture, representing Indian heritage, representing Indian culture and be a spokesperson for it, which is very problematic because I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that we think about these things today. I want to question, I want to challenge, I want to provoke. That is my primary means of engagement. So I really wanted to go out and be like, now I'm going to write a chick lit romance. And I started, that's also a very problematic word, but I wanted to write a romance and all of that, but then that is actually getting shelved because now I started again to, and this is a strange thing and I'm curious to get your input on this because sometimes I feel as a writer we have certain kinds of a duty or a purpose or a weird kind of dharma in the world we occupy. And I am increasingly disturbed by the way we reinterpret our past in this country, especially when it comes to ideas of sexuality, of gender. So something that one of the projects that I'm working on right now is taking a whole bunch of subversive myths from different religious traditions in India, from the Sufi tradition, from the Katha Upanishads, from the Buddhist traditions, but myths that all make us question our ideas of what is right or wrong or ideal. So from the Sufi tradition, I'm very much interested in the love story. Here we are getting to the second word in this panel title, love, between, now my head is going all over the place, but there's a figure in Pakistan called Madhulal Hussain, who's a great Sufi saint, and Madhulal Hussain is actually two people who fused together because of their love. They became one person because they loved each other so intensely, and they were actually two men who fell in love with each other. Sheikh Hussain, who was a Muslim Sufi saint, and Madhulal, who was a Brahmin boy he fell in love with. And I think this is such a wonderful story because it crosses so many boundaries. It crosses that religious boundary. It crosses the idea also of, love has to only be between men and women. And so that is one sort of story that I'm telling there. I'm also telling the story of Sulasa, a courtesan who pushes her husband off a cliff but becomes this great role model of courage and empowerment for women. So all different. And that story comes out of the response to the Me Too movement and a lot of violence that's happening against women that we see that's finally becoming expressed. This is a story about expressing that. So I'm looking at also pulling out those aspects of myths, and that's what's interesting me now. But I don't want to keep writing about this over and over again. But Sharanya, I want to, what's next for you after Andal?
I didn't expect to write this book this year.
Okay, she told me something really scary, and that is like now going to give me nightmares for the rest of my life. She wrote it in 6 weeks. She wrote an entire novel in 6 weeks. I thought I was doing really well with writing this last novel in 3 years. She wrote her next novel, her forthcoming novel, in 6 weeks.
It's a little novel. It's only about 150 pages, but it's completely unprecedented for me, and for most people, I think it's an unrepeatable act for me. What can I say? She just came to me, and she just poured out of me.
She's kind of intense like that.
She's really intense like that. She had a brief and intense life, right? So you did some research, and then you did a lot of imagining and channeling of Ilango in the 2nd century. And I worked with 9th century Nanda. And we were really thinking about what a writer's interior life is like. And the division between what we hear about them, the sort of public persona, like Andal's Instagram,
What would it look like? I'm in love!
It'll be beautiful, I'm sure. Like the distance between that and sort of the everyday pain and longing and unbelonging that goes into the work. Can you tell us a little bit about how that plays out in your own life? Samhita, Agni, and Sam.
Oh God, yeah, I feel like some sort of schizophrenic person walking around. The actual act of writing is such a lonely one in some ways, and it's a very intense one because sometimes I feel possessed, and I feel possessed by something that's other than me. It's a story, it's an idea, and there are times when you're like, why is this story and idea possessing me? And why do I have to write this particular story? Why can't I write another story? And why can't I go for a walk right now? Why can't I take a holiday right now? But damn it, I have to write this. And if I don't write this, I've had this niggling sense of guilt that just persists, like anxiety or dread that sits on me. And the only way to release it is to write. And I don't think, the act of writing is seen as a very glamorous one. But when you actually sit down and write, it's painful. I find it very painful. How about for you, Sharanya?
So, writing is very cathartic for me. Writing is pleasure.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Damn it, I want that.
But not writing is pain. And so, for instance, this year, I was in a state of bliss and rapture for 6 weeks. Now, I've been in utter pain the rest of the time because I'm not writing. And, your personal life never matches the glamour of what is perceived of your life. That is not true. You asked me earlier, and I actually missed answering what is next for me. I'm working on 2 very immersive books about the Tamil culture of the east of Sri Lanka, which is where I'm from, which you never hear about because the northern Jaffna Tamil narrative and the civil war that happened in that region is all you hear about. But there is a matrilineal, matrilocal culture in the east of Sri Lanka, which is disappearing.
Interesting.
Yes. So I'm doing 2 books about that.
Oh, wow. Can you do this thing of writing 2 books at the same time?
So I work on like 5 projects at the same time. In fact, one of those, I've been trying to write it since I was 19 years old. I'm 33 now. And I accidentally wrote another novel this year. So yeah, absolutely. I always work on several projects.
Can you manage it? Because I also sometimes feel like, oh my God, I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to do this, and yet it's such a chaos in my brain.
So for me, in terms of my process, it only happens when it happens. So I don't have any kind of discipline. A lot of writers will say you must write every day, and it's true that process can work for you. For me, it does not. So I can go 1 or 2 years without writing. I will only write my columns. I'll write some journalism. I will do the work that I have to do for money because writers in India don't usually make a living from our books, which a lot of readers don't realize. We make a very small percentage. It's like 8% or 10% of the retail price that you pay. So most of us have day jobs or independent wealth if you're very lucky. And
none. I don't think either of us. We're not independent wealth. We wish we were.
Yeah, that would be nice if we were. But yeah, so that's my process. Tell me about your process.
Again, I find it very difficult to be the kind of writer who writes every day. Again, it's a story, you have to be inspired, or you have to feel something very deeply to write about it. Otherwise, sometimes just think this is too difficult a process to go through unless you feel passionately about something. So I don't write every day. I wish I did. But I think also that sometimes writing, you were talking about it being catharsis. I find that in the periods that I don't write, there are too many things going on in my head. There are too many emotions that I feel. And writing somehow lets that all come out. And that's where self-expression, it's kind of emotional and psychic hygiene. And I think to keep myself sane, I have to write. Do you feel that?
I think if I didn't write at all, even if it was only for like 6 weeks, once a year, or whatever, I'd be an incredibly miserable person. Yeah.
We do it to save our families. We write to save our families from our true selves.
Well, actually my true self is in my writing. Do we have time for questions or anything? Do we have time for questions? Anyone have a question?
Since you both started writing very early, what would you say to someone very young who's been reading all her life and enjoys writing about getting published? Is that something that one should think about when they're young, or not at all? What would you say?
I don't know actually, because my publishing, I got published without thinking about it. I was working on this version of the Mahabharata, and then one of my mother's friends walked into our drawing room, and I had all my pieces of paper scattered across, and I was writing like a maniac. And then she was like, "Oh, your daughter's got something interesting happening here." She looked at what I was doing, and she said, "Why don't you show it to a publisher?" And my friend is a publisher. And then my mother, being proud mother type, herded me off to see publisher, and publisher said, "I will publish." I did not expect it to be published. So that was quite magical, and I don't know anyone, that really lucky as well, because I've struggled since then. I wrote The Missing Queen, which was a thriller many years later, and I struggled for 4 years to get that published. It got turned down, and it got turned down, and it got turned down, until Sita's Ramayana got on the New York Times bestseller list, and then publisher is like, "Hello," which also happens, right? So I don't know. I think yes. I think if you feel passionate about what you're writing, look for a publisher. Then you have a message, or you have an idea, or you have an important feeling that needs to be shared, then look for a publisher. But that was be the one reason I'd say.
I have a slightly different take to that, which is I think that if a child is interested in writing, the parents and the school should absolutely encourage her to publish in magazines, in journals, in newspapers, but to wait a little bit for a book. Because I've been encountering a lot of students whose parents have paid for them to publish books. This can later become very embarrassing for the child. Because naturally they will outgrow what they have already written. And once you published a book, you published a book. Even if it disappears, even if it goes out of print. What happens when you send your work to magazines is that you will encounter rejection. And that rejection can teach you a lot about how to become a better writer. So I would say unless you get a really great opportunity like Sam did as a child, where a traditional and established publisher wants to take a chance on your work, please don't encourage children to self-publish their work. That can be quite detrimental to their growth as a writer later on.
Absolutely, and I think what Sharanya suggests about going through the magazines and newspapers is really great. That's the ideal route of going through a thing. Again, I will add, because the Mahabharata came out when I was 12, and it's still the book that I'm known by. It's very difficult for my own sense of identity to be beyond that, to escape my 12-year-old self. It's also a book I cringe reading. I cannot read it, and I'm perpetually asked at literary festivals, please read from that book because that is your most famous work, and I cannot. I refuse to, because that again, it becomes very embarrassing to go back and read it. At 34, I would write it very differently. Thank you, Sharanya.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you all so much for listening to us on this weekend afternoon.
Wanting to experience adventures as a part of any journey we've had is a common desire that a lot of us probably share. Debu, a 14-year-old boy from Willem, was one such person who faced many unexpected and interesting adventures on his journey of looking for his father. Today, we have the good fortune of meeting the person who introduced us to Debu's world, Miss Deepa Agarwal. She loves to write fiction and poetry for both children and adults and has published over 50 books. A great amount of her work has been recognized in India and abroad, like Caravan to Tibet, being on the 2008 honor list of the International Board on Books for Young People. Along with her love for writing, she loves telling stories to her grandchildren or anyone who is willing to listen. Welcome, Ms. Agarwal. We're very happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Can you hear me without a mic?
Yeah.
If you can hear me, do we need it for the video or something?
Mic.
It's not full. Okay, you've all already heard what the story is about. It's an adventure story about a boy who travels to Tibet to look for his father, who got lost in a trade expedition. And now the passage, it's a little, to give you a little background, this story was inspired by the fact, my grandfather's people, they were a nomadic tribe and they used to trade with Tibet. And they used to make this journey over the high mountains. It was a very difficult journey and Devu has to undertake this journey. And then there's a character who will come in this passage. His name is Trilok and he's kind of the villain of the story, one of the villains. Okay, now they have been camping, they just go on their horse ponies and they go with their yaks and jibbos. Jibbos are a cross between a mule and a yak. And they break camp in between, they camp in between, they put up tents and here they are breaking camp. Okay. When the ropes had been checked and tightened around the loads, the wooden saddles put on the horses and everyone had mounted, the caravan began to move. The ascent began, a climb so steep that Devu could never have imagined it. He glanced up at the covering of snow that fanned out towards them and felt the chill numbing his cheeks. Despite the heaviness that weighted his head, the sense of awe was overpowering. His head was heavy because at a high altitude there's very little oxygen, so automatically your head begins to feel heavy. He had never been so close to the high Himalayas before, and soon he would actually go over them. Now, Bijli is his pony. Bijli's feet were sinking into the snow with each step, and Devu's heart contracted with anxiety as he scanned the whiteness, relieved only with clumps of dark rock poking out of it. But Bijli carried on as if it were one of their routine journeys. She's a mountain pony, so you see, she's not bothered by the snow. They passed the Gori glacier, and the first pass was before them. Uta Dura, the Camel's Pass, 17,590 feet high. Devu's heart lifted as they passed through the walls of snow. Everyone was silent, concentrating on the effort, except for the occasional bar from the sheep or a horse snorting or a word of encouragement to the animals from the men. This pace had to be maintained. They pressed on to Jayanti Dura, which lay to the east, slightly lower at 17,000 feet. Exhaustion began to slow them down. But they kept going. Devu glanced anxiously at the sky. The light was beginning to fade and they still had to reach Kumri Bingli, the last pass and the highest at 18,300 feet. A sudden jolt tore him out of his reverie. Bijli had slipped. They were sliding down the rubble-strewn path. Chill fear knotted Devu's stomach. He clung to the pony, desperately whispering to her to hold on. Get off, Devu! Sonam shouted as Bijli dug in her heels and regained a shaky footing. Sonam is a Tibetan man who is Devu's friend. This isn't child's play, Trilok jibed, overtaking him on the narrow trail. Devu's face reddened as he dismounted and trudged on. Then his head jerked up. Someone was shouting, "Careful, Trilok!" Devu turned to ice. Cousin Trilok's horse was teetering at the edge of the trail. The ground was slipping away from beneath the horse's feet. There was a sickening crunch, and a hoarse cry forced itself from Trilok's throat. He tried to jump off, but one of his feet was caught in the stirrups. He shrieked, his arms reaching helplessly towards the mountainside as he fought to get free. Sonam Darka, who was just ahead of Trilok, began to turn back. Trilok's horse was struggling to regain its footing, with no success. In another second, both the horse and the rider would tumble down the steep incline to certain death. Shaking off the paralysis that gripped him, Devu ran and threw his arms around the horse's neck. Its front legs were still on firm ground. He tried to pull it back, tugging with all his might. It was like moving a huge rock. He could barely get a proper grip, but somehow he held on. The nervous animal shook its head violently, making it more difficult. If only he could hang on till the others came. "Help! Save me!" Trilok screamed, his voice high-pitched with terror as he tried to disentangle his feet from the stirrups. The men were shouting. What were they saying? Grimly, Devu clung on. The horse was sliding away despite all his effort, dragging him along too. "Let go, Devu!" someone yelled. But how could he let the horse go plunging down the slope with Cousin Trilok? "Devu, let go!" Kalyan Singh commanded him. His heels were slipping through the snow along with the horse. The animal's frightened neighing, together with Trilok's shrieks, added to his confusion. Should he let go and save himself? No. Devu gave one last desperate heave, and miraculously, the horse jerked forward, almost falling on top of him. Someone pulled him away, just in time. It was Sonam Darka. Devu stood there panting, sweating despite the freezing cold. When he got his breath back, he whispered his thanks. Shall I stop here? Is it time? Yes. Okay, I'll stop here. We have just a couple of minutes. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Okay, do you like adventure stories? Yes? What is your favorite kind of story? Sorry? Adventure, mystery. Do you like stories set in the past? Historical fiction. So this is actually a historical fiction. It's set in the late 19th century. And I must share with you that I did a lot of research for this. You know, a story may come into a writer's head, and as I told you, the idea came to me because, you know, my ancestors had, you know, had traded with Tibet, and I'd heard about all the dangers of the journey, and apart from, you know, the difficulty of climbing the mountains, there were also robbers who attacked people, and there were wolves. So it was a very difficult journey and very, you know, adventurous to write a story about it. So I had to get all my details right. So how do you think I did my research? Yes? I didn't get it.
Yeah, it was good. You must have done some good research.
Yes, but how did I do my research? How do you think? What is? Actually, I didn't really go to Tibet. I couldn't go, but I went to the, the remote village where they were supposed to live. I went there, and I read a lot of books. That is how I did my research. I read lots and lots of books, and I saw films. Whenever I heard about a film on Tibet, I, would try to go and see it. So that helped me to imagine, what the place was like. So that's one thing we need to do when we're writing historical fiction or even for other books, because as you know, we don't know about everything that is going on, right? So do you have any questions? Yes?
How long did it take you to write this book?
Okay. Well, this was a strange book. I can say technically it took me about 16, 17 years to write it. It sounds like a long, long time. But actually what happened, I wrote it like a long short story. And it was published in a magazine. And then again it was published in another magazine in 3 parts. And then I got the idea about maybe 12 years later that, I think I can expand it into a novel. So I did some more research, and that is how it took me about 16 years to write this book. So is that time up? So anything else that you'd like to ask? Yes. When did I write my first book? Actually, my very first book was a picture book story, and I wrote it a long time ago in 1985, and actually it was published rather late. It was published 5 years later. So that was my very first book, it was published in 1990, and surprisingly, I had 3 books published in 1990 because that one book took so long to come out. So in the meantime, I had written 2 other books. They were mystery stories. So that was a lucky year for me to have 3 books coming out. Yes.
How many books did you write, and which was your favorite one?
Which was the
Favorite one.
favorite one to write? Okay. Well, I can say that this is my favorite to write because, I felt it connected me with my, family history, So that's why I found it very interesting to write this book, the whole process of research. And then it was the kind of story that I like to write also. I like to write adventure stories. But yeah, I've written, as ma'am told you, I've written over 50 books. A lot of them are picture books, for younger kids. And some of them are retold folk tales and myths. Like there's a book that's selling here called Sacked Folk Tales that you can carry around. So that is one of my very recent books. And I also like to write mystery stories. I've written a lot of mystery stories as well, and ghost stories, and I've also written biographies of famous people from our history, like Rani Lakshmi Bai. You know about Rani Lakshmi Bai?
Yeah.
I've written a biography, and I've written a biography of Chanakya. Yes. Other languages? Well, I have written stories in Hindi also. So, mostly folk tales and short stories.
I have one more question.
Okay. I think you have.
What is the autobiography of Chanakya?
It's called Chanakya, the Master of Statecraft. It's there on the internet. Ghost stories? Okay, I have an e-book. It's called The Letterbox, The Mailbox Post and Other Spooky Stories. One more quick question. Last
As
question.
a child, did you want to become a writer? Were you like into books and...
Well, I was an avid reader. I was a real bookworm. But at that time, I was not very sure that I'd become a fiction writer. Actually, I wanted to become a journalist. But I ended up becoming a fiction writer. I'm sorry, I think I have to...
Okay, you can just wrap up. Last question.
How did you get the interest in writing?
The interest to write books? Because, I used to read so many books. When you read a lot, you read, and then one day the thought comes to you that maybe I can write my own stories too. And I think that's exactly what happened to me. That I felt now I'm ready to write my own stories. Okay, thank you so much for being such good listeners, and I hope you enjoyed the taste of this story, and I hope you go on to read this book someday. Okay, bye and all the best.
Thank you so much, Caravan, for being a part of the book exhibition, the book reading, and giving us a tidbit into Caravan to Tibet.